What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I wanted to break down a very underrated mechanic that came with Modern Warfare 2, and this is a visual suppression effect that you may or may not have noticed while playing. It turns out there's actually a fair amount to cover with this mechanic, so let's dive right into it, and let's first show off what I'm talking about here. In this game, when somebody shoots near you after not being shot at for a few seconds, we'll get into the cooldown in a bit, you will see this sort of an effect here. It is a very fast effect that you have to be paying attention to notice. But when you slow it down, you can definitely see the impact of this. You get a little bit of a screen shake, and then you also get a lot of a radial blur, so the edges of your screen especially will blur for a very short period of time. Now this effect will happen regardless of which direction the bullet is coming from, so even if you're in a face-to-face gunfight and they shoot a little to your left or a little to your right, you will get the suppression effect, or even if they're behind you, for instance, and they shoot at you, you will get this suppression effect. And I wanted to test how close you have to shoot to your target in order to trigger this effect. And it looks like, based on my testing, this is a roughly 4-meter radius. So it's kind of just a sphere that's centered on the character model. And if your bullet passes within that sphere, they will get this suppression effect. Now, unlike last year with Call of Duty Vanguard, this suppression effect appears to be 100% visual. It has no impact on movement speeds, and it doesn't force you out of a sprint if someone shoots near you. One interesting thing I found with this, though, is it appears that the caliber of your weapon does have an impact on how much of a suppression effect the enemy player will experience. And we'll compare these back to back. This is what it looks like with an SMG. There's really not much of a suppression effect there, whereas this is what it looks like when a sniper rifle fires right next to you. And you can see, especially in slow motion, the effect is much more pronounced. Next up, something that's really interesting to point out with this suppression effect is there is a cooldown on this. And this is why you probably don't notice the suppression effect too often in the game, except for certain situations where you haven't been shot at in a little while. Based on my testing with this, it appears you only get this suppression effect if a bullet hasn't passed through that sphere for at least about 3 to 4 seconds. It's hard to pin down exactly what that is, but it's roughly a 3 to 4 second cooldown. So if you have bullets constantly flying at you, you're not going to be constantly suppressed. You're only going to see that suppression effect for the first bullet that passes through that sphere. In saying that though, there are some exceptions to this cooldown when it comes to the suppression effect, and the first exception is any one of the LMGs. These have a special characteristic attached to them where they either have a significantly smaller cooldown or perhaps no cooldown at all. As you can see here, when we're firing full auto with any one of the LMGs, you're going to be seeing this suppression effect apply every couple bullets, it seems like. So that is an additional characteristic, we'll call it. I don't even want to call this a benefit. It's just an additional characteristic of using an LMG. And this also carries over to marksman rifles, although it's going to be less noticeable with these because they aren't full auto like LMGs. But you can see here when I'm shooting next to the target with a Tempest Torrent, there obviously isn't a 3 to 4 second cooldown here. You will see that suppression effect pop up again every couple of bullets that you fire. I guess I should also mention this is the same with sniper rifles. There doesn't appear to be a cooldown with sniper rifles, but then again, since they're bolt action, you're going to be having those shots spaced out pretty far anyway. As for all of the other weapon classes, they appear to have that standard 3 to 4 second cooldown, where that suppression effect won't be appearing unless there is a pause for 3 to 4 seconds. Now on top of that, I did want to test a bunch of things to see whether or not they have any impact on the suppression. Like, can you make the suppression effect worse for your enemy players, or can you perhaps try to lower this suppression effect? So I first tested the suppressor muzzle attachment, and it turns out that has no impact on this suppression effect. Then I tried flash hiders, thinking maybe that's a unique characteristic of a flash hider, and once again, no effect whatsoever here. Then I tried guns with subsonic bullet velocity to see if perhaps this has a smaller suppression effect. And again, this doesn't appear to affect it at all. Like if you take an SMG that has a really high bullet velocity and put it side by side with a low velocity SMG, they're going to give you the exact same suppression effect. And then finally, I also tested a bunch of the perks like Cold-Blooded, for instance, or Battle Hardened, just to see if that would have an effect on incoming bullets causing a suppression effect. And once again, I was unable to find any perk that has any impact whatsoever on this suppression effect, whether that's from the player that's shooting or the player that's being shot at. So as far as I can tell, the only thing that could potentially change the suppression effect is the class of weapon that you're using. If you're using something like an SMG, you're going to have a very small suppression effect and also a large cooldown, whereas something like an LMG or a sniper rifle tends to give you a more impactful suppression effect, and also it doesn't have that same cooldown. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for everything that I tested that could potentially interact with the suppression effect, or everything I could think of at least. And now I want to share my brief thoughts on having this suppression effect. For me, I really didn't like suppression a whole lot in Call of Duty Vanguard. It wasn't a game breaker or anything, I just felt like it was annoying that it could actually impact your movement speed, and I believe, if I remember correctly, it would also cause you to come out of sprint if you were sprinting and someone shot near you. I just find it weird that there's a punishment for an enemy shooting near you without actually even hitting you. I mean, they're being rewarded for missing their bullets, which is just strange to me. But in Modern Warfare 2, I actually really like this suppression effect, because more often than not, this benefits the person that's being shot at, and it punishes the person that misses their shots on an unsuspecting enemy. Because now they are alerted to the fact that you are shooting at them, and especially if you're really far away from them, they otherwise maybe wouldn't have realized that you're actually shooting at them, because maybe they'll hear your gunshot, but it's really far away, so they think it's not really a danger to them. Well, now they're immediately alerted to the fact that somebody's shooting at you, and therefore you need to find cover or try to start moving sporadically to dodge the incoming bullets that are coming your way. So yeah, I actually find it very refreshing to finally say that there's something that I like that Modern Warfare 2 has done different from previous Call of Duty games, and this is the type of thing I would like to see going forward in Call of Duty, as long as it is a purely visual effect, and also as long as it's subtle enough that it doesn't completely screw up your vision as you're trying to navigate the map. I think this is a great addition that makes a lot more sense than the suppression effect in Call of Duty Vanguard, because that effect would benefit the shooter even if they were missing, rather than the target. So there we go, there is something nice I can say about Modern Warfare 2 there, and this is where I want to hear from you guys in those comments down below. Now that you know exactly how this suppression effect works, how do you feel about it? Do you like the fact that it exists, or would you prefer if there was no suppression effect at all? And then on top of that, between Vanguard's suppression effect that could affect movement and this suppression effect, which one would you prefer if you had to choose between the two? Just let me know all of your thoughts regarding suppression down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.